The call came while I was resetting someone else's password. The headset pinched my ear, the ticket queue hissed like a kettle left on a back burner, and a stranger was spelling his mother's maiden name like it was a bomb code with 5 seconds left on the clock. The fluorescent lights above me stuttered the way they always did around lunchtime, like even they were tired of the whole performance. I typed. I clicked. I said the lines I've said 1,000 times about security best practices and temporary access tokens. The usual theater. Then my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't recognize at first because it was mine and not mine. A vibration that didn't fit the rhythm of my day. I had a window open for a client's Facebook business page, fixing their admin roles. Another tab spawned itself like a weed through concrete. I didn't touch anything, at least not consciously. The browser just moved. A new stream, a new name, a thumbnail that hooked the corner of my attention. And then it opened. I saw a living room that looked exactly like mine, because it was my living room. The gray couch with the loose thread I kept meaning to fix. The throw pillow Kara said was for lumbar, but never actually used. The lemon ginger candle flickering like it had stage fright in a talent show it never signed up for. The stream title was the kind of gym flyer optimism that makes your teeth hurt. Smile for the neighborhood. A phrase too casual, too upbeat, like the caption on a disaster photo someone posts with, "Monday, am I right?" And there they were, half out of frame, pretending the camera wasn't there, except the camera was on because the world is full of cameras, and we turn them on ourselves, and sometimes forget how to turn them off. Kara's laugh, muted by the mic placement, but still shaped like its usual self. Evan, my wife's friend, leaning in, casual like a man who's been told more than once he looks good on camera. I didn't stand up. I didn't say a word. My mouth went dry like a keyboard shelf in an empty office after layoffs. The stranger on the helpline spelled another letter and asked if capital letters mattered. I told him they mattered very much. I don't think he heard the way my voice thinned out on the last word. Then I muted him, took a screenshot of my living room, my wife, and the man she called a friend, and I saved the link like evidence in a safety deposit box. The chat counter in the corner of the stream started moving. Hearts. Laugh, reacts. The little confetti symbols of people who have nothing at risk. A sea of tiny judgments that never sleep, never apologize, never testify. I felt the floor steady instead of tilt. I am good in a crisis. It's not a compliment. It's a diagnosis. I called the house phone. That was my only move, the most analog weapon in a digital war. When Kara answered, breathless like a sprinter crossing an invisible finish line, I said, "Smile. You're on camera." I didn't shout. I didn't say her name. I just said the line like I was reading the weather. The stream hiccuped as if the room itself flinched. Evan blurred out of frame. Something fell. Maybe the candle. Maybe the world. A sock arced across the frame like even the laundry was ashamed. The chat exploded the way a crowd does when something unscripted happens on live TV. I took another screenshot. I am methodical when the sky collapses. The stranger in my headset asked if I was still there. I told him yes, and we were all still here, and I would email instructions. Then I closed the ticket and left my desk without logging the time, because some clocks you don't stop to punch. I walked to the parking lot, and the spring air was cool and clean in a way that made me suspicious of it. Like the world was trying too hard to be neutral. Birds chirped. A car alarm went off 3 rows down. Normal things, staged poorly. In the corner of the stream, the number of viewers climbed. I found the car, sat, and let the engine idle. I thought about crashing home. I thought about keys and shouting and plates. Then I thought about how evidence looks when it is fresh and how it looks when it is smeared. And I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and let the idle settle into my bones. I took a picture of the dashboard clock. I saved the time. I saved the link again in case it moved or died or someone decided the truth needed editing. I told myself a plain sentence: do not make a mess you cannot later describe. By the time I pulled onto the street, the live had ended. It didn't matter. It had already ended for me, in a different way, with a different tone. I parked down the block and watched my own house from an angle I use when I carry groceries. The porch light was off, the blinds were halfway, the lemon ginger candle was probably still burning, because she always forgot it. Forgetting was one of her hobbies. I waited. The door opened, and a man ran out with a hand over his face and a body that didn't know where to put itself. He forgot his shirt. He remembered his shoes. He ran like the lawn would tell on him. He hit the sidewalk and didn't look back. I let him go because there would be time for him later, and because I wanted him to think he was fast. I walked into my house quieter than I ever had before. The air smelled sweet and wrong at the same time. The candle trembled like it was afraid of being the only light left. Kara stood by the couch with a blanket held up like a surrender flag. "Nate," she said. Nothing else. My name was the whole speech, the whole apology, the whole obituary. I nodded and blew out the candle. The smoke curled into the air and turned the lemon into a hospital hallway. I didn't ask questions. I didn't say why. I took the blanket, folded it once, and placed it over the arm of the couch the way she liked it when people came over to drink her flavored water and talk about seed oils. Then I said, "I need the Wi-Fi password," and watched her blink at the cruelty of the smallest possible thing. "It's on the fridge," she said. Her voice had the soft corners she used with clients, the version of herself designed to be believed. I walked to the kitchen and looked at the magnet with the password she had chosen because she thought it was cute. I took a picture of that too. Not because I needed it, because I wanted to own every detail. I sat at the counter and opened my laptop. She tried to talk. She said my name again, like maybe this time it would grow legs. I opened a private window. I pasted a link I shouldn't have had, but did. I watched the replay bar jump and stutter. I watched the comments. They weren't kind. They weren't creative. But they were forever, which was their point. "I didn't mean for you to see it," she said. "That's the most accurate thing you've said all day," I said. She tried again. Something about explanations. Something about mistakes. The kind of vocabulary people use when they want to call a fire a candle. I didn't look up. She asked if I was going to say anything else. I said, "Not yet." And that was the truest thing I had. She stood there, weight shifting from one foot to the other, like guilt had suddenly become a physical object she didn't know how to carry. She wasn't crying yet. That would come later, I knew. Kara never cried first. She waited for a cue, for an audience, for a script that told her when emotion was appropriate. Even now, there was calculation in her silence, like she was waiting to see whether I would be the version of me she could negotiate with, or the one she couldn't. The replay kept going. The chat filled with people who had no stake in the truth, but every appetite for spectacle. They posted emojis and abbreviations like they were carving initials into someone else's gravestone. I watched strangers turn my life into content and felt nothing immediate. Shock is a freezer burn, not a flame. "You're going to post it, aren't you?" she asked, voice thinner now, like she was the one who'd run barefoot into the night. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted her to sit with the possibility that I might. That the same internet she trusted to stay on her side might glance my way instead. That her privacy was not a shield but a currency, one she had already spent. She took a small step forward. "Nate, please, can we just talk?" "Talking is what got you comfortable," I said. "Talking is how you rehearsed this with him. Talking is what you're asking for now, because it's the only thing you ever had control of." Her mouth tightened. Not anger, fear of losing narrative. She wanted to say I was being dramatic, or paranoid, or cruel, but she knew none of those words would survive the evidence sitting 4 feet from her, in 1080p. He didn't mean anything, she tried. I finally looked up. Then why did you let him mean something in my house? Silence. Heavy, but not honest yet. She swallowed. It was stupid. It was... I don't know. I felt trapped, bored, like I was disappearing, and he... Found you, I finished. Lucky him. Most people have to search. Her face crumpled for a second, and then she rebuilt it. I knew that rebuild. I'd watched her do it in arguments with friends, with her family, with customer service reps who didn't yet know she was about to ruin their day. She was a woman who could compose herself while the plane was already falling. You're not even angry, she said, like it was an accusation. Oh, I'm angry, I said. I'm just saving it. Anger is loud. I don't want loud. I want accurate. Her shoulders trembled. What are you going to do? That depends on what you think I'm capable of. Her eyes widened, not in fear for her safety. She knew I'd never lay a hand on her, but in fear of the digital kind of violence, the kind that doesn't bruise the body, only the reputation. She understood that kind better than anyone. I closed the laptop slowly, not dramatically. I wasn't making a point. I was drawing a line. I'm going to bed, I said. She blinked. Just like that? Not just like that. Nothing from now on is just like that. But yes, for tonight. Because sleep is a kind of weapon too, and I don't lose my aim over someone else's choices. I stood. She stayed still, like movement might break something fragile between us, even though it was already dust. At the stairs, I paused. You should blow the candle out next time, I said. It's dangerous to leave it burning. She nodded, but neither of us reached for it. Let the lemon ginger watch. In incident response, you say what you will not do. You take the keys to the server room out of your pocket and you tape them to the desk. You lock your ego in the bottom drawer. You start a log and you keep it boring. I wrote rules in a notebook I keep for groceries and passwords and things I want to remember because nobody else will. No breaking the law, no touching accounts that aren't mine, no hacking, no fraud, no lies that can't be repeated under oath without a cough. Gather only what the world offers for free. Let other people carry the heavy things you need carried. Keep your hands clean, your voice low, and your temper cold. I called Jules from my car because the kitchen felt like a stage and I didn't want a scene. Talk to me like a client, I said. Okay, she said. Scope? Compromised asset. 2 internal actors. Unknown third parties with access. Containment recommended. No legal escalation at this time. We collect. We plan. We execute fixes in waves. Fixes, she said. Is that what we're calling it? That's what we're calling it until we call it something else. Who knows what? Everyone who watches her life like a show, I said. And me. Jules didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't tell me to think of the consequences. She asked for the timeline. I gave it to her in timestamps and windows and URLs. She said we would keep it boring because boring is safe. She said she would look at public sources and city schedules and anything anyone dumb enough to show off had already posted. She told me to eat something. I told her about the lemon ginger candle. She told me to blow it out again. Kara tried again that night. You misunderstood, she said. It was a joke. It was a dare. It was a class stunt. It was nothing. She kept rearranging the furniture of her story to see if a new layout made the room look different. I let her talk until her words ran dry and her breath got that fast flutter that makes me want to hand her a paper bag. Are you going to call the police? She said finally. Not for this, I said. This is between us and the weather. The weather? She said. You'll see. I slept in the spare room with the door open and my phone face down, as if its dark screen could absorb the loose ends of a life I hadn't admitted was already unraveling. The room smelled faintly of paint and cardboard, the scent of things that haven't decided whether they're staying or going. I didn't dream. Or maybe I did. But whatever passed through the night left no fingerprints, just a blank stretch of hours I couldn't account for, the kind that feel less like rest and more like a pause in a sentence no one plans to finish. In the morning, I made coffee the way I always do. Water first, then grounds, then an unnecessary but comforting tap on the filter basket, as if precision could substitute for clarity. I canceled 2 subscriptions I pay for because she likes to pretend she discovers new music every week, even though the algorithm does most of the heavy lifting. I watched the confirmation emails roll in. "We're sorry to see you go," as if the companies were the ones being abandoned. I took her name off the card for the Pilates platform she loves and told myself it was not revenge. It was budgeting, a simple correction of accounts. Still, I felt the click of a small internal switch, the sound of something being tallied. I looked up the HOA bylaws because even as a bystander I had learned one thing about suburbs. The rules are not suggestions. They are the bones. The skeleton that holds up the illusion of order. The shared hallucination that identical lawns equal neighborly peace. I scrolled through PDFs written like legal spells, every sentence a hedge against uncertainty. No parking within 15 feet of a hydrant. No visible trash cans before sunrise. No exterior paint colors outside the approved spectrum. Eggshell, desert sand, compliant beige. The bylaws were less about safety and more about choreography. Everyone knew the steps or learned them the hard way. The next morning I woke before my alarm, the clock glowing its digital 4:58 like an accusation. I went outside at 5 in the morning and took a picture of a red curb near the gym. The air had that thin chill of manufactured weather, the kind that comes from sprinklers running before dawn. There was a hydrant, squat and official, the city's bright reminder that fire doesn't care about property values. There was a coupe that liked to think it was a race car, all spoiler and borrowed confidence. Evan's coupe. Evan, who believed HOA rules were mainly for people who didn't have his kind of smile. Evan, who had given my ex lessons in living spontaneously, which apparently included ignoring signage and boundaries of every kind. There was a sign about towing that didn't bluff, its bold letters promising consequences in the efficient language of municipal threat. Street sweeping day. Evan's coupe sat there like a dare, a shiny red shrug at the universe. I sent the appropriate text to the appropriate number because that's how you make the city do what it's already decided to do. No embellishment, no excess emotion, just the kind of official-looking time-stamped message that fits neatly into a bureaucratic groove. Then I walked past the car and glanced down at the vents. I had a small plastic bag in my pocket from the garden center, the kind you use to feed plants that can't speak for themselves. Fish emulsion, legal, non-toxic, memorable. It smelled like the ocean had been left out in the sun to rethink its choices. I did not pour it into anything. I didn't need to. I tied the bag with a knot and wedged it just at the edge, where it would only burst if the car tilted just so, the way tow trucks tilt cars when the universe reminds them of municipal codes. And then I walked away. People imagine moments like that feel cinematic. Slow motion, triumphant score, a wind that knows whose side it's on. But really, it felt like anything else. Cool air, early morning birds, the faint headache of not enough sleep. The tow truck arrived at 6:30 and did what tow trucks do when they meet hydrants and red paint. Hydraulic arms, a practiced lurch, the choreography of correction. When they tilted the car onto the bed, the bag did what knots do under pressure. A soft pop, a dark bloom, a smell that rose like a rumor. I filmed from the sidewalk with my arms still and my heart steady. The camera picked up the moment the tow driver wrinkled his nose, then shook his head with that universal expression of, "Not my problem, not my upholstery." The smell drifted in slow, confident waves. It wasn't violence. It was a story that would stick around inside upholstery for a long, educational time. That's what I told myself anyway. I walked home past identical driveways and identical morning routines. garage doors yawning open, dogs stretching their suburban legs, sprinklers clicking in time like they were practicing Morse code. You could almost believe the neighborhood was peaceful if you didn't listen too closely, if you ignored the quiet wars happening through email threads and fence heights and whose trash bin wandered an inch over the property line. Inside, the house felt bigger than it should, as if her absence had expanded the walls. The coffee mug from earlier still sat in the sink, a wet ring at the base like an echo of the morning. I rinsed it out, turned it over on the drying rack, and watched the last drop fall as slowly as a thought I didn't want to have. It would have been easier to say I didn't care, to pretend detachment was the same as peace. But there's a difference between being done with someone and being finished with the aftershocks. Hearts don't sign the same paperwork as bank accounts. Later that day, the neighborhood group chat lit up the way dry brush does when someone flicks a cigarette. Anyone see the tow truck this morning? Whose red coupe was that? What is that smell? Theories bloomed. Someone blamed a sewer line. Someone else blamed raccoons. No one blamed the universe for having a sense of humor. By lunchtime, a new thread emerged. Reminder: hydrants are emergency equipment, not decoration. The HOA president posted a screenshot of the bylaws, highlighted in pale yellow like a middle school study guide. Reactions rolled in: thumbs up, check marks, the passive-aggressive emoji that smiles with all teeth. I made another cup of coffee. I watched the steam rise and curl like it was trying to form words. Maybe everything we do is a letter we never send, addressed to someone who stopped checking the mailbox. A day passed, then two. I let the silence sit the way you let bread rise, slowly, naturally, without poking at it. On the third day, I saw the coupe back in its driveway, scrubbed on the outside, but that smell, that lesson, lingering like a stubborn memory. Evan stood beside it with the resigned slump of someone who had Googled how to remove odor permanently and didn't like the answers. He saw me. I waved. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement, the way you nod at a stranger who once borrowed something you can't ask to have back. He didn't wave. I didn't expect him to. Because here's the thing about stories: some are written to be read out loud, and some are written just to live in the walls of a place, in the fibers of a seat, in the moment someone opens their car door and remembers that actions have a half-life. I spent the next week trimming the rosemary bush that had begun to impersonate a small tree. I returned library books I'd renewed out of habit, not interest. I deleted photos, not because I couldn't look at them, but because I finally could. The house stayed quiet, but the quiet started sounding less like absence and more like room. At night, I slept without leaving the door open. I kept the phone face down, but this time it wasn't a shield, it was just a phone again, a tool instead of a witness. The bylaws stayed bookmarked on my laptop, though, not because I needed them, but because it felt good to understand the bones of the place I lived in. Every town, every relationship, every life has rules written somewhere, even if no one admits it. Sometimes all you can do is learn them well enough to know when to stop obeying. One morning, I walked past the gym again. The curb was still red, the hydrant still waiting for its day in the sun, the street still designed for sweeping both leaves and illusions. No coupe, no tow truck. Just me and the knowledge that small stories can have long echoes, even when no one writes them down. I didn't film anything that day. I didn't need to. Some memories keep their own footage, and some endings don't need applause, just distance. That afternoon, I sent Landry at the gym a single email from my personal account with a link to the stream archive, a timestamp, and a friendly subject line about personal conduct and the optics of staff using community spaces. I didn't say scandal. I didn't threaten. I didn't even mention the toe. He answered with corporate thank you language and a sentence that meant trouble for Evan. We will review this under our policies and get back to you. I printed the email and put it in a folder. Paper is slow, but paper doesn't log you out at random. Handle the car, handle the man. I met Maya, who is not the villain she plays on the HOA threads, at the mailbox cluster because that is where news collects like rainwater. She is a realtor and a satellite dish in human form. She didn't pretend she hadn't seen the stream. "You okay?" she asked, and for a second it almost sounded like she meant it, but I knew better. People mean many things when they say okay. They mean, "Are you a problem?" They mean, "Are you going to make this awkward?" They mean, "Will there be sirens?" "I'm making a list," I said. "You always seemed like a list person," she said. "There's a DocFest showcase in 3 weeks. Evan is on the poster. He's going to flip tires in the parking lot and yell at people for free. You know, fitness." "I know fitness," I said. "It's the thing people do while pretending to smile." "You should come," she said. "As a citizen." "I will," I said. "As a citizen." I joined the private HOA ladies' chat with a clean account made of bland facts. I didn't lie. I said I was new and just wanted to learn the ropes. They let me in because that is what people do when a digital doorbell rings. Within a day, there was a screenshot of my couch posted by someone who didn't know where screenshots came from, only that they carry heat. The caption was a question that wasn't a question. "Did you see this?" Hearts and gasps. I watched them make a weather system out of me. Evan cornered me in the parking lot after a late shift, like he was doing me a favor by letting me live. He tried to look taller than he was. He smelled faintly of old cologne and new panic. "Delete whatever you think you have," he said. "I have public links and your best angles," I said. "If you think that's private, you don't understand how doors work." He pushed my shoulder with 2 fingers like he had read on a forum that this was dominance. I put my hands up and kept my voice level. "Not today," I said. "You don't want a scene." He wanted a scene. He always wanted a scene. He shoved harder. I open hand slapped him once, just enough to make sound, just enough to teach him the difference between pushing air and touching a person. The clap echoed. Officer Doyle, who is not my friend and not my enemy and lives 3 units over from Maya's sister, stepped out of his cruiser with his face set in the shape that means, "Please don't make me write more than I have to." He wrote us up as a mutual disturbance and told us to go home. That's what we did. Some nights, grown men need a hall monitor and a bedtime. When I got home, Kara had posted an inspirational quote about second chances and the dignity of silence. The comments were not silent. Someone made a joke about lemon ginger candles and integrity. Someone else asked if we ever needed a deep clean. I didn't reply. I printed, hole-punched, and filed the whole thing. Paper, slow, sure. The paper and the people. HOA meetings always smell like coffee that quit early. Landry didn't come. He sent an email to the board about workplace conduct and community reputation that found its way into printouts with red underlines. I didn't distribute those. Someone did. Maybe Maya. Maybe the wind. A packet showed up on the folding table by the pastry tray. Links, timestamps, photos of the hydrant and the toe, the live replay ID. Nobody had to raise a voice. The murmur did the work. Kara sat up front in her chairwoman posture, while her eyes tried to float away. She said the word misunderstanding twice. The room did not accept it. The room doesn't accept postings taped to the wrong side of the bulletin board. The room accepts bylaws. When the meeting ended, Evan tried to square his shoulders at me in the parking lot like last time had been a fluke. He had a bruise along the cheekbone from where the tow guy's hook had probably kissed the hood of his pride. He stepped in too close. I stepped back one and let him see my palms again. "Stop filming me," he said. "I'm not filming you," I said. "The neighborhood is filming both of us. Smile." He lunged. I turned my shoulder and let his momentum go by. Officer Doyle was already there because of course he was. He told us both to knock it off. He told Evan to take a walk. He told me to go home. It felt like 4th grade and I was grateful for it. On the way home, I canceled Kara's second card for our streaming bundle. Not revenge. Accounting. Chase scene. In place. The day of the boardwalk run, I parked 2 blocks over and walked with a coffee I didn't drink. Evan was doing sprints with a set of clients who paid to be called beasts on camera. He had a wireless mic and a face like he'd slept in a tanning bed. The wind off the water carried his voice in smug little loops. I stood far back and kept my phone low. He noticed me anyway because men like him can smell witnesses. He shouted something about haters and discipline. Then he bolted. He thought I would chase him because he thinks everyone wants to be him. I didn't run, not at first. I followed at a pace that said I had all day. He cut between vendor tents. A tarp slipped. He skidded on wet plywood and slammed into a table full of pretzels. The pretzel guy swore like he'd been waiting years for a reason. People cheered on instinct because slapstick is an ancient human right. Evan popped up red and furious and pointed at me like I had planted gravity. The cameras of strangers did their job. I walked past the scene and didn't smile. There would be time for that later. At home, Kara asked why I was ruining everything. Because you built everything like a deck without screws, I said. You painted it pretty and hoped it would hold. This was supposed to make us stronger, she said. Say that again, I said, like you hear it with your own ears. Jules called that night with a present. Brand partnership, she said. Morals clause. Needs 2 independent outlets to cite public scandal that may harm sponsor reputation to trigger early termination without payout. Not a rumor mill, real coverage, measured tone. I can be measured, I said. You can be cold, she said. Cold looks like measured in print. The blogger and the receipt. I emailed a local blogger with the kind of subject line that gets opened without sounding like a car accident. I didn't lie. I didn't even color. I offered timestamps, public links, public HOA minutes, the tow photo from the city portal, and a note from Landry about conduct review that he had sent when he thought he was writing to a citizen and not the hinge of a door. I didn't offer quotes. I offered facts that could be checked from a chair. The blogger wrote a clean piece with short paragraphs and no adjectives. A neighborhood newsletter followed suit, like it was holding hands. Landry forwarded me a message from the sponsor that mentioned the clause in polite corporate language. DocFest pulled Evan's slot. I did not dance. That would have been stupid. I highlighted a sentence and put it in the folder. Kara's class attendance dipped, then cratered. Clients stopped tagging her. A woman who used to bring her lemon water with a slice of cucumber posted a new schedule at a different studio. Kara sat at the table and stared at her phone like it owed her money. It feels slow to me, I said. Please stop. It ends when I say it ends. She started to cry without the dramatic shoulders, which is how I knew she was scared and not performing. I poured her water and left it next to the candle she had relit like a reflex. I didn't touch the match. I wasn't the one who kept starting fires. The townhome was mine before we said vows in front of cousins who don't talk anymore. My lawyer sent the proper notice to terminate her license to reside. That's how the letter said it, with a calm that scratched. She didn't scream. She packed. Pride is a good mover when you don't care what it breaks. I scheduled pest control for the afternoon she came back for boxes. The tech set traps in plain sight. Neighbors saw. They made faces. She cried in the doorway and told me I was cruel. Maybe I was. Maybe that was the point. I installed a motion-activated sprinkler near the side path because rabbits eat my basil and because it would make me smile when it startled them. Evan walked straight into it carrying a mirror Kara loved. The water hit him in the teeth. The mirror frame knocked his shin. He swore and looked around like the world should be ashamed of itself. Maya laughed out loud while pretending to yawn. Officer Doyle waved from his porch without standing up. The forecast started to talk about a storm. The anchor's hair didn't move when she said nor'easter. The DocFest organizers insisted on a pop-up at the marina lot anyway because sponsors need photos. Evan promised on his stories that he'd be there rain or shine. He said the word resilience, like it was printed on the side of his protein jug. Maya texted me a screenshot of the flyer with a smile face that meant everything but happiness. Nor'easter. It rained like the sky had a grudge. Tents leaned into the wind. Banners snapped and tried to escape. I wore a rain jacket I'd had since college and brought a rolling dolly with a box of Kara's things that didn't mean anything to me. Photos in frames, her monogrammed hoodie, a water bottle engraved with her name. The engraving had a shallow scratch through the last letter where I had slipped with a key by accident and left it, because small truths know how to wait. Landry told Evan to pack up. Evan paced with a mic that cut in and out. He shouted about community and haters and the human spirit. The wind took his sentences and shredded them into confetti. I bumped a tent stake with my shoe and watched a banner tumble onto the hood of his coupe, which had been detailed since the tow but still smelled faintly like old fish stew in summer. The rain woke that smell up like a bad memory. People gagged and laughed and gagged again. I kept my face blank, which is a mask men like me wear when they want to scream. Sirens sounded close by, and Officer Doyle stepped in with his hands up, like he was teaching kindergarten. He moved people back and told Evan to stop yelling. Kara stood near the stage with hair stuck to her face and eyes that hated me so cleanly I felt rinsed by it. She started toward me. The rain made her voice ragged. "How much more?" she said. "Enough to make it stick," I said. One twist. She pulled me under the edge of a tent that wasn't holding anything up anymore. "I turned on the camera," she said. Her voice was low and flat and honest, in a way I had not heard since we signed mortgage papers. I wanted him to choose me in public. I wanted the neighborhood to know. I wanted a story that wasn't a whisper. I didn't think you'd see it like that. Not live. Not like that. It fit like a key you forgot you had. The way she always did angles at parties. The way she said content like a prayer. The way she treated attention like rent. She had set the scene that wrecked her life because she didn't know another way to be sure she existed. If I had heard that 2 months ago, I might have felt something complicated. In the rain, I felt nothing except the cold certainty that the last thing I could take from her was the audience she worshipped. "You don't get to direct this anymore," I said. "Please," she said. "Please stop." "I am stopping," I said, "right after the lights go out." I texted Maya a line that didn't need punctuation. "I'm ready to talk." She was there already, of course. She always is. The blogger was too, with a hood up and a phone like a lantern. "Peek. Cut the lights." I rolled the dolly onto the plywood stage with a slow, careful push, like I was bringing a cake to a party. The wind tried to tear the box out of my hands. People drifted closer because people always drift closer to a center of gravity, whether it's a fire or a fight or a man with a look on his face. I put the box down and took out the water bottle with the scratched initial. I held it up. "Lost and found," I said into no mic at all. The crowd went quiet in the way crowds do when something live and sharp is about to happen. I lined her things in a row. Photos, bands, the hoodie, the lemon ginger candle that had given our living room a second-hand spa smell while my life unstitched. "We are going to clear some inventory," I said. "We are going to make room for air." People shifted. The blogger lifted her phone. Maya did not smile because she is not an idiot. I pressed play on a small speaker and let the tow truck beeps fill the wet wind. I tapped the HOA minutes on a cheap tablet, the motion-activated sprinkler video, the street sweeping sign, the sponsor's clause in black and white. No fakes, no forgery, no hacks, just the things people typed when they forgot they were writing in ink. Evan charged with his shoulders high. I stepped sideways and let him rush through the space where I had been a second earlier. He hit a table and knocked samples of powder into the rain. The powder turned to paste on his shoes. He slipped again. Officer Doyle was there with his open hands. "Enough," he said, and somehow we all heard him over the storm. I walked to the canopy with the sponsor's name printed large. There was a red tag zip tied to a pole that said, "Unsafe structure," because the wind had made it true. I didn't put that there. The weather did. I lifted a spare banner I had bought from a discount sign shop with a legally different name and a crooked logo and ripped it in half like a magician tearing a deck. Amateur theater, maybe. But it played. Phones lifted higher. Kara looked small for the first time since I met her. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel bad. I felt like I had finished moving a couch up a narrow stairwell without dropping it. I rolled a portable spotlight left by some hopeful marketer and turned it so it blasted Evan's face. He lifted his hands like light was violence. The smell of his car rose up again, fishy and sour under the pelting rain, as if the weather had a sense of humor I didn't share. People coughed. Someone laughed, and then covered their mouth like it was a sin to have joy here. Kara touched my arm. "I am empty," she said. "Is that what you wanted?" "No," I said. "I wanted quiet." "So take it," she said. "Take your quiet." I reached down to the generator and unlatched the fuel line. It slipped off with a round little pop you could feel through your fingertips. The speakers hiccuped and died. The light slammed off. The lot fell into a storm dark full of phone screens and breath and the sound of rain like nails on a roof. For half a second there was only me and the wind and the knowledge that my life had a before and an after, and I had chosen the hinge myself. The marina lights blinked back on in a stutter. The banners flapped like surrender flags. Sirens dopplered past on the road and faded. Evan stood soaked and small. Kara stood still as a post with her hoodie in the mud. Maya lowered her phone and looked at me the way a news anchor looks at a camera right before the red light goes out. I didn't bow. I didn't speak. I turned and walked off the stage, down the plywood ramp, through the puddles the color of coffee, past Officer Doyle, past the tent where the pretzel guy was packing up like a gentleman who had seen more than enough. My shoes were heavy with rain and something else I didn't name. I didn't look back. The storm had the last word. I let it speak. The rain thickened, turning the parking lot into a dim watercolor of taillights and wet asphalt. Every step away from the stage felt like peeling tape off skin, slow, reluctant, but necessary. I could still feel the crowd behind me, their conversations already mutating, rumors sprouting like weeds in the dark. Someone would say I snapped. Someone would say it was planned. Someone would swear they saw me smile. The truth would be none of those things, and all of them, tangled in the kind of knot no one bothers to untie because it's easier to cut the rope. That was how people worked. They trimmed reality into pieces that fit the shapes they already believed in. They weren't interested in the whole story, only the version that made them feel clever for predicting it, or righteous for condemning it, or comforted for not being the one on stage under all those lights. I passed the dumpsters near the edge of the marina. The lids rattled like they were trying to whisper. The wind smelled of gasoline, fried dough, and low tide. I remembered the first time I had ever come here, years before the speeches and the banners and the promises printed in colors that looked brave under sunlight and dishonest under moonlight. Back then, the dock was just wood and salt spray, and the sound of gulls pretending to be storytellers. I was a different version of myself, barely assembled, all elbows and plans, full of a quiet belief that momentum itself was a kind of virtue. I thought if I just kept moving forward, I'd eventually arrive somewhere that felt like the truth. It's funny how you can spend your whole life building something just to find out you were nailing the planks into the wrong blueprint. You don't realize the mistake at first. It sneaks up on you. One day you look down and notice the floor is uneven, the walls lean inward, and suddenly every nail you've ever hammered feels like a confession. You start to wonder whether the blueprint was wrong, or whether you were the wrong pair of hands for it. And then comes the worst thought of all. Maybe there never was a blueprint to begin with, just a handful of sketches drawn by people who didn't have to live inside whatever you built. A car door slammed somewhere behind me, but I kept moving. The world felt thin, like the air after fireworks when the smoke hasn't decided whether it wants to rise or settle. I walked past the ticket booth, the window smeared with fingerprints of people who wanted to believe a raffle could change their life. The poster still flapped there, my name in bold, the slogan underneath it chipped by humidity, "A better harbor for everyone." I wondered who the slogan was for. I wondered if it had ever been for me. The letters seemed to wobble in the wind, like even the ink was embarrassed to be associated with a promise that had already aged into a punchline. I kept walking, the rain stitching itself into my jacket, the cold creeping in the way bad habits do, quiet, familiar, patient. My shoes slapped against the pavement, leaving temporary ghosts on the asphalt. I wasn't sure where I was going, only that staying still would feel like surrender. The marina lights flickered, reflected on puddles that looked like doorways to some deeper, quieter version of the night. If I stared too long, I half expected to see my reflection blink back at me with a different expression, one that understood everything I couldn't yet say out loud. When I reached the pier, the water was restless, heaving against the pilings like it wanted to climb out and walk around just to see what the world looked like without being fenced in. That restlessness felt familiar. Maybe that was what drew me to the sea all those years ago. Not the beauty, not the calm, but the undertow, the reminder that everything, no matter how still it seems, contains an argument inside it. I sat on a bench slick with rain, the wood cold enough to make my bones notice. I could still hear distant shreds of applause, not for me anymore, but for whatever came next. Crowds were good at moving on. They shed allegiances the way snakes shed skin, quietly, efficiently, leaving the old layer behind without a backward glance. I used to think applause meant approval, but now I knew better. Sometimes applause was just noise people made to drown out the fact that they didn't know what they were clapping for. The wind shoved my hair across my forehead, and for a moment I imagined what the headlines would look like in the morning. They loved verbs like implodes and crumbles and falls apart. They'd pick the most dramatic possibility and stretch it until it snapped. They'd interview people who barely knew me, ask them to speak with authority about why the moment went wrong, as though certainty could be manufactured like fast food, predictable, quick, and bad for the heart. I leaned back against the bench and let my eyes close, not to rest, but to listen. The distant foghorn, the shuffle of water hitting the pier like a tired drummer, the faint hum of a highway that never slept. These sounds had been here long before I showed up with my slogans and my speeches, and they'd stay long after. That thought should have made me feel small, but instead it made me feel honest. There was something comforting about knowing the world didn't hinge on my choices. I was a drop in a tide, not the moon that pulled it. I thought about the people who had stood beside me on stage. Some of them believed in me. Some believed in the idea of me. Some just believed in being close to whoever held the microphone. I used to resent that last group, but now I wasn't so sure. Maybe believing in proximity was the only thing that ever made sense to them. Maybe it wasn't cynicism, but survival. Not everyone could afford the luxury of principles. Some people had to borrow whatever they could just to keep moving. The rain eased a little, softening from a drumbeat to a whisper. I opened my eyes. The harbor lights looked like someone had dropped a handful of coins into the water and left them glowing. I could taste salt on my lips, though I wasn't sure if it came from the sea or from a memory I hadn't finished chewing on. Every choice I'd made, every speech I'd given, every handshake, every late-night strategy session, every moment I'd tried to be larger than myself, they all sat inside me now like stones in a pocket. Not unbearable, just undeniable. I remembered the night we chose the slogan. A dozen of us in a rented room above a bakery that smelled like burned sugar and dreams. We tossed around phrases like medicine that might cure the sickness we couldn't name. A better harbor for everyone had floated to the surface, not because it was true, but because it was shapeless enough to sound true. A harbor, safety, arrival, community, But I realize now it never said who the harbor belonged to, or who got to drop anchor there, or who would be turned away when the water got crowded. The worst part wasn't that people would be disappointed in me. The worst part was that they had every right to be. I had asked them to believe I knew what I was doing, that I could steer a ship I hadn't even finished building. I wasn't the first to make that mistake, and I wouldn't be the last, but repetition doesn't excuse anything. It just proves how little we learn from the wreckage we leave behind. A gull screeched overhead, a sound too sharp to be poetic. Good. Not everything needed to be a metaphor. Some things just existed to be loud and inconvenient. I envied that. I'd spent years sanding down my edges to fit the shape people expected, and now that I'd stepped outside the outline, I wasn't entirely sure where the real border of me was anymore. The crowd would go home, the posters would sag, the headlines would ask questions they already believed they'd answered. I would disappear for a while, not because I was hiding, but because silence felt like the only honest language left. Maybe I'd come back. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe the harbor would rebuild itself without me, or maybe it would sink into the mud like so many other hopeful structures. For now, I just sat, letting the rain trace its way down my sleeve, letting the night make room for my breath. The water slapped the shore again and again, patient as a lesson I was only beginning to understand. And somewhere behind me, the rumors kept growing, twisting, blooming. Wildflowers in a field I had planted without realizing the seeds were already there, waiting for the storm. The rain eased into a drizzle as I reached the end of the parking lot. Beyond the railing, the boats bobbed like restless lungs. Their masts clanged in the wind, impatient, metallic. I wanted to climb into one, cut the rope, drift until the water forgot to hold me. But I wasn't running. Not yet. You don't get to vanish until you know what you're leaving behind, and I wasn't sure what qualified as mine anymore. Ahead, the road bent toward town, where the shop windows would still be glowing with the kind of light that pretends to be warm. I knew what was waiting there, the late-night diners, the vinyl booths where coffee tastes like burnt hope, the booths where people would talk about me without lowering their voices. I imagined the newspapers printing early editions, the headlines trying to turn a moment into a narrative. Candidate cuts power mid-speech. Public stunned. Investigation to follow. They'd need a photo, maybe the one where I'm shaking hands with the mayor, maybe one where the smile's too wide to trust. They always choose the one that tells the story they already decided to write. I stopped under the awning of the old bait shop. The neon sign buzzed, flickering between bait and just IT, which felt like a verdict. Inside, old Mr. Pomeroy was probably still sorting hooks by size, even though his eyesight went bad years ago. He once told me that fish don't care about the line, only the lie at the end of it. I hadn't understood back then. Now I did, and the understanding tasted like rust. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I could guess the messages. Where are you? What happened? Call me. We can fix this. Don't do anything stupid. The last one would come from someone who thought they still knew me. I let the phone ring itself out. Silence came back like a tide. I kept walking. The puddles became shallower, the street more level. The storm had tired itself out over the marina and left the town with only its wet footprints. A dog barked behind a fence. Somewhere a TV played a late-night commercial promising miracle cleaning spray, the kind that erases any trace of what was spilled. I wondered if they made one for people. I turned onto Harbor Street. The bookstore was closed, its display window still filled with the themed table I had suggested to the owner last month. Local authors, local stories, local lies. My book wasn't there. I had never written one. Too many drafts, not enough truth that didn't cut. I had a folder full of beginnings. Chapter 1, The Year the Tides Changed. Chapter 1, When the Lights Went Out. Chapter 1, I Should Have Known. Every version felt like a false start, the kind where the gun fires but you realize you were never good at running. Across the street, The diner glowed like an accusation. Its red sign dripped neon down the slick sidewalk. I pushed the door open, and the bell made that tired jingle that sounds like it gave up on nostalgia. The place was half empty. Just a trucker nursing black coffee, a couple of teenagers poking at fries, and a woman in a yellow raincoat staring out the window like she was waiting for a prophecy. The waitress glanced up, recognized me, then pretended she didn't. I appreciated the mercy. I slid into a booth near the back, the kind with cracked vinyl seats that sighed under your weight like they'd been holding secrets longer than the town itself. The laminated menu was the same as always: eggs any style, burgers with names that tried too hard, pie slices that tasted better at 2 in the morning than they ever would in daylight. I didn't need to read it. I ordered the usual: black coffee and whatever soup was still warm. The waitress nodded, wrote nothing down, and walked away as if the transaction had been completed years ago and we were just repeating it out of habit. The trucker looked like he'd been carved out of the highway, creases in his face like exit ramps, eyes reflecting taillights that no longer existed. The teenagers were arguing in whispers, the kind of argument that wasn't about fries at all, but about who cared more, who cared first, who would admit it. The woman in the yellow raincoat kept tracing circles on the fogged-up window, each one fading before she could finish the next. Maybe she was drawing halos for ghosts. Maybe she was erasing names only she remembered. The coffee arrived, dark enough to swallow the room's weak lighting, steam curled up like a story trying to escape its first paragraph. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat settle into my fingers, reminding me I still had a pulse, whether I wanted one or not. The soup followed: chicken noodle, broth the color of tired gold, noodles floating like messages that never reached their destination. I ate slowly, not because I was hungry, but because it gave me something to do besides think. Outside, the rain tapered off into mist, as if the night itself was deciding whether it wanted to stay or drift into morning. Harbor Street was quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet, more like the hush after an argument, when everyone is replaying the same words, wondering which ones were mistakes. I knew that silence well. I had lived in it, written in it, buried drafts in it. I thought about the folder on my desk at home, the one filled with beginnings that never learned how to walk. I had convinced myself that the problem was time, or work, or the weight of real life pulling me away from fiction. But the truth was simpler. Every story I started felt like digging up a body I wasn't ready to explain. Fiction is just truth rearranged, and I had run out of safe ways to arrange mine. The waitress returned, refilled my coffee, and lingered the way people do when they want to say something but decide against it. She looked tired, different from exhausted, different from sleepy. Tired like someone who had handed out pieces of herself all day and was down to the scraps. I wondered if she had a folder too. Maybe everyone did. Maybe the only reason some people finished their stories was because they ran out of room to store the unfinished ones. The bell over the door jingled again. A man in a rain-dark coat stepped in, shaking droplets from his hair. He scanned the room like someone expecting to see a familiar face, didn't find one, and chose a booth near the front. The waitress greeted him with the same nod she'd given me. The rhythm of the place didn't change, but something in the air did, like a chord subtly added to a song, unnoticed but irreversible. The teenagers left, abandoning a basket of half-eaten fries. The trucker paid in crumpled bills and disappeared back into the night, swallowed by roads that didn't care where he was going. The woman in the yellow raincoat stayed. She hadn't touched the water glass in front of her. She kept staring, waiting for something the window clearly couldn't give her. Maybe it wasn't prophecy she wanted. Maybe it was permission. I looked out at the street again. The puddles were fading, losing shape as the pavement drank them in. Storms leave behind reflections, but they don't last. By morning, the town would look the same as it always did. Paint peeling, boats bobbing against tired docks, and the bookstore pretending that stories could save us if we just bought enough of them. Maybe they could. Maybe they used to. My spoon clinked against the bowl, and for a moment, the sound echoed louder than it should have, as if the room needed a reminder that something was still moving. I took another sip of coffee, bitter, honest. No miracle spray could erase the taste. I thought about the first time I ever tried to write a book. I was 16, convinced that the world would fall apart if I didn't put my version of it on paper. I wrote on notebook pages that smelled like pencil shavings and cafeteria lunches. I wrote because I didn't know how to speak yet, not in the way that mattered. Somewhere along the way, I learned how to talk, but forgot how to write. Or maybe I learned how to lie and lost the courage to tell the truth on purpose. The man in the rain-dark coat asked for pie. The waitress cut a slice from the display case, set it in front of him, and he stared at it like it held an answer to a question he'd been avoiding. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself, over coffee cups, blank pages, and nights that refused to end until I admitted something I didn't want to face. The clock above the counter ticked in a steady, indifferent rhythm. Time doesn't stall just because we do. The hands moved forward, even if nothing else did. Eventually, the diner would close, the neon sign would go dark, and the street would return to its usual insomnia. I would walk home, step over the gutter where the storm's last memory lingered, and stare again at the folder of Chapter 1s. But something shifted inside me as I watched the raincoat woman finally reach for her glass. She didn't drink, she just held it, as if acknowledging it was enough. Maybe that's what a beginning really is. Not the perfect sentence, not the immaculate plan, but the act of touching something you've been afraid to pick up. I finished my coffee and let the mug sit empty, the way a page waits after its first word, patient, unjudging, somehow still hopeful. I didn't know if I would ever finish a book. I didn't know if the truth I'd been avoiding would behave on paper or rip through the lines like a storm with somewhere specific to go. But the thought didn't feel as heavy as it had earlier. Maybe the weight stays the same, and we just get stronger hands. The waitress brought the check. I paid, tipped more than I could afford, and slid out of the booth. The vinyl didn't sigh this time. It felt like it let go. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped outside, and for the first time in a while, it didn't sound tired. It sounded like punctuation. Not an ending, not a period. Something smaller, quieter. A comma, maybe. A pause before the next line. The street glistened. Not from rain anymore, but from the way light remembers water even after it's gone. I walked past the bookstore again, past the stories I hadn't written, and turned toward home. The air smelled like wet pavement and possibility. I didn't hurry. Beginnings don't require speed, only willingness. When I reached my apartment, I unlocked the door, flicked on the lamp, and sat at the desk where the folder waited. I opened it, read the first line of every abandoned draft, and instead of choosing one, I started typing a new sentence. Not perfect, not polished, just true enough to hurt a little less than silence. Outside, the last puddle vanished. Inside, the story finally took a breath. I slid into a booth by the window. The seat stuck to my soaked jeans. I didn't take off my jacket. When the waitress came over with a pad, I ordered coffee. She asked if I wanted pie. I said no, but she brought it anyway. "Looks like a pie night," she murmured, and walked off. I stared at the slice. Apple, the good kind, the kind that tasted like autumn and school fairs and things that once felt permanent. Steam rose from the coffee. I wrapped my hands around the cup, feeling the warmth work its way into my bones like a negotiation. Outside, the rain thinned into mist. The marina stage was probably being dismantled by now, volunteers folding chairs, wiping equipment, throwing away rain-wrecked pamphlets. Evan would be talking to the press with that nervous jaw tick of his. Kara would refuse comment, but look like a headline anyway. Maya would upload the last clip, the moment the lights died, slow motion. It maybe, Add text overlay. The exact second everything changed. Everything doesn't change in a second. It changes in inches. It changes every time you compromise a truth you still pretend is whole. It changes every time you choose the easy version of yourself because the real version is too sharp to carry in public. The only thing that happens in a second is realization, the snap, the hinge, the pop of the fuel line when you finally decide the machine doesn't get to own you anymore. I took a bite of the pie. It was warm, soft, tasted like something honest. I wondered if I had ever tasted honesty before without flinching. The door opened and someone entered, dripping rain onto the linoleum. I didn't look up at first. Didn't need to. People come and go. That's what they do, especially when you're the one who turned out the lights. But the footsteps stopped at my booth. A pause. A breath. Then a voice. You really walked away. I looked up. It was Maya, hood down now, hair slicked flat from the rain, phone still in her hand like a second spine. She slid into the booth without asking, sat across from me, and set the phone face down on the table, like a peace offering or a threat. Maybe both. I thought you'd run, she said. I am running. Not literally. Not yet. She studied me the way people study a painting they're afraid to touch because they don't know if the paint is still wet. They're already rewriting it, she said. The story. You know that, right? I figured. They're saying the storm knocked the power out. Convenient. Some think it was sabotage from the other side. Even more convenient. She leaned forward. And some are saying you did it on purpose. Which version do you like? She didn't answer. She just watched me, eyes steady, unblinking, as if looking for the hinge moment, still hovering in the air like smoke. You gonna tell me why? She asked. I didn't. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wasn't sure the answer was a sentence yet. It was still just a feeling, raw and unfinished, like a bruise that hadn't bloomed. Instead, I said, You filmed it. She nodded. You'll post it. Another nod. Make it true, I said. Her expression shifted, something between surprise and suspicion. True how? Not the version they'll write tomorrow. The version that happened. Which is? I don't know yet. That's your job. She leaned back, exhaled, tapped the phone with one fingertip. You realize if I do that, you're done. Not just out of the race, out of the myth. Maybe the myth was the problem. We sat with that. The rain thinned to nothing. The trucker left. The teenagers paid in crumpled bills. The woman in the yellow coat stayed, still waiting for whatever she thought was coming. You could still fix it, Maya said softly, as if offering me a life raft made of rumors. Go back, explain, spin it. I'm tired of spinning. You'll disappear. Good. She stared at me a moment longer, then picked up her fork and took a bite of my pie. It is a pie night, she agreed. We didn't talk after that. We didn't need to. The silence had its own grammar. Outside, the storm was gone. Not defeated, just finished. Storms never lose. They just move on to another sky. When the waitress came back with the check, she looked at me the way you look at someone you once voted for and now only recognize. She didn't ask for an autograph. I was grateful. Maya left first. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't have to. Her phone would say it for her, eventually. I sat a while longer, watching the window fog, listening to the low hum of the diner's fluorescent lights. The world kept existing, unbothered by the fact that I had just unstitched the future I was supposed to wear. I finished the coffee, left a tip big enough to mean something, small enough not to look like apology. Then I walked back into the night, into the place between who I had been and whoever was left. The air smelled clean, rinsed. The banners at the marina would be coming down. The headlines would rise like steam. People would choose the version of me that best fit their own story. But the truth was simple, quiet, heavy as wet shoes. I had turned off the lights before they could blind me. There was no redemption in that, no grand reveal, just choice. I walked, and for the first time in months the ground didn't feel like a stage. It felt like earth.